Okay, so yeah, as Kevin said, my role is design and user experience, and so ultimately my job is to design an intranet that will engage, and that's what we've all been talking about today. But as we know or are about to find out, designing an intranet can be pretty tough. So where do you start? Well, early on in my career, it looked a little bit like this. Gather everyone in a big room and say, who wants something on the homepage? Well, pretty much everyone. Who wants something social? All right. Who wants a blog? Okay. So clearly there's a more effective way of doing things. And really, what we need to know is, how do we achieve this? How do we achieve engagement for all these types of users? Well, you'd be surprised to know, particularly coming from me, a designer, that the answer doesn't lie with the design team. In fact, this presentation really isn't about visuals, as Kevin said, although they are important. There's loads of examples of visuals online, if you take a look. So this presentation really is about the process that feeds the design. So how do you get from an embryonic, old, sometimes neglected intranet to a fully designed, evolved platform that will provide those reasons to log on, return and lead that Dan mentioned. And it can be quite daunting because there are loads of people to please, loads of ideas, loads of theories. But I like to say that if you follow a process, if you trust it, it's going to work. And so here is the process that we've evolved over the last few years at SmallWorlders. So you start with a kickoff, you do some research, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we need to do there. You run a workshop to generate the ideas after the research, fit it into the engagement strategy that Dan talked about. You will need to revisit your scope once you've done all this. You may have an idea of what you wanted, but after all this, things might change. And then finally, you can get on to the design and the build and launch plan and all of that lovely stuff. So today, I'll just talk to you about this bit, the research to the design. And for the most part, this will be entirely independent of which platform you're using. This will be relevant to everyone for large projects and small projects. So to simplify, this is what I'll talk to you about. So let's start with research. And the first three there, I'll talk to you first about, and then we get on to the users. And those first three, stakeholders, platforms of content, and data. This is the first step, really, to identify everything you can about the existing setup. So who should have input as the stakeholders, what they think should be on there, what platforms do people use, what content works well. Often there are other systems in place, so do they need to be replaced or complemented? And what data sets are there? How are we going to find out what has worked in the past, and what does it tell us about the users? So let's go through these. The stakeholder interviews are very important at the beginning. We need to speak to anyone who is ultimately a decision maker or influential in the project. Now, if they're not directly part of the team, they may still feel like they need to be involved. There are always a few people like that. And now is the time to include them, really. Get their opinions down. They'll be really enthused by the process. And actually they will have some great insights. And so these are the questions, really. Describe the platform. What are the business needs? Who are the users that we need to aim for? What does success look like in their eyes, and how are you going to measure it? And that one in the middle, who are the users? This is particularly important because we need to identify who we need to speak to as part of the user research phase. And often different stakeholders will have different opinions on who are the most important users to speak to. And often the users will have a different opinion to the stakeholders as to what's important. But I'd like to draw your attention to those first two, describe the platform and business needs, because these two questions tend to tease out different ideas on what are the reasons why people would go there and what is most exciting. And in fact, I'll take you through an example of where the difference between those two answers was quite stark. And this is with one of our clients at De Beers. The stakeholder in question described the platform as a modern social system, content sharing, conversation, a place where anyone in the organization can share ideas and help each other, which I guess sounds quite familiar to everyone. Well, actually, this is a very valid goal. It's quite an admirable thing to aim for, and all of this would fall nicely under those reasons to return that Dan talked about earlier. But when I asked about the business needs that it addresses, I got a different response. And it's finding the files, accessing the assets and guidelines. That was the focus that we needed to apply to the design. And that's what's going to draw those conservatives and skeptics who wouldn't be really that enthused by social and sharing. So we redesigned the homepage to look like this. There's still got your news and comms at the top, but the main focus really was the materials that they needed to access and some of the internal reference material down there. So with the stakeholder interviews, make sure you get past all the exciting stuff that they want to tell you about and try to tease out the more boring stuff that actually, there lies the reasons to log on that you need to be focusing on. The platforms, as Dan mentioned and Kevin, Wedge will talk a little bit more about content strategy later, so I won't dwell too much here. The main points really you need to look at with this bit are what exactly you want to migrate, what's the current quality of the information that you have. We like to aim for 10% migrate, 90% delete. That's not always feasible, but there's always some old stuff that you can get rid of, so now's the time to do it. Any content that worked well in the past, anything that failed miserably, it'd be good to get an idea of that, and how often you expect new content to be created. That's a great thing to have. And of course you need to know what other projects are planned in the future that could affect this one, because you don't want to step on their toes. Now, as far as data goes, again, Kevin covered a lot of this, but you need to really find anything that will help you figure out what's popular with your users, who the movers and shakers are, and those enthusiasts and ambassadors, and set up some benchmarks so that you can then compare back once you've done the update. But the most important thing really with the research are to look at your users. And now there's loads of techniques to research your user base, but ultimately you need to find out not just what they do, but why they do it. What motivates them? What do they need every day? What issues do they have when they try to get what they need? And how can you solve that? So I'll take you through, again, a couple of examples that highlight really the importance of this stage of the project. So the first one comes from Heineken. It was a platform called the BSM, which is a platform to capture and report market brand plan information. So think of it as your tax return, but for brand managers. So very exciting stuff. So we spoke to the stakeholders, and those are the two goals: more efficient input, more markets using the tool. And so we didn't have much time to do the research or much budget really, so we combined a remote usability test with some user interviews, which this lady was one of the participants. And one of the things that came out of it, there were a lot of things that came out, but one of the things was that actually the platform itself was quite easy to use. It was certainly better than Excel for inputting data. There were lots of tweaks you can do, obviously, because there's always improvements you can make. But fundamentally, it was nicer to use, and people enjoyed using it. So the main problem, though, that we found out was that before they started, they had no idea of what was required. They actually had to go through the process in order to find out the data. So they'd get to one page, they'd get the data, then they get to the next one, have to go away and find the data. And it just took them a long time. And actually they had no even indication of the timing required, so they couldn't delegate. They missed a lot of their deadlines. So that was really the source of frustration when they were going through this tool. And so after this research phase, we found that the biggest impact on these goals wasn't to redesign the whole platform, but actually to create a welcome pack where we told them what data to get and who to get it from, what the expected timing was so they could plan ahead, and yeah, what the data requirement was, and the Excel templates. And we're still working on this at the moment. It's quite a recent project, so this is very much the direction we're going in this year. And maybe next year, once we've solved this, we can start to do a bit more tweaking around the edges. So the second example I want to show you about the user research phase comes from a trust at the NHS that we work with. Some of the stakeholders were very clear that mobile is a top priority. There are lots of people on the front line, they work in the wards, they don't have access to a PC that often. So if we were to offer up a lot of the functionality on mobile, then that would solve their needs, according to the stakeholders. And so we decided to put this to the users. So we did a quantitative survey. We offered up a set of options and asked them what their ideal intranet would contain and what they would find most useful, and compiled the results. And what we found was mobile was right down there at the bottom. And in fact, what they cared about overwhelmingly was that they needed the information that they needed to use when they sat down to do their paperwork. And it didn't matter where they were. They knew they needed to go to the computer to do their paperwork. They had 20 minutes. They just needed to get that information quickly. And so that's what we're focusing on. And we suspect, actually, that once we've solved that top bit, then maybe mobile might become a more attractive prospect once they know that the information is available. So perhaps next year, phase 2, 3, we can look at mobile. But fundamentally, we just need to get the data up there. And so that really shows the value of doing your research properly. It's not necessarily, you won't get the results that you think, you won't necessarily get the results that your stakeholders think. So you need to speak to the users. And even if you don't have much time to do it, you've got to get it in there to get the overall picture. This is a book that I used to carry around with me all the time. I recommend you get it. I'll give you I'll link to it in the presentation later. It goes through all the ways of researching that are available, and you don't necessarily need to know it. You may not want to change career to be a UX grandmaster or whatever they're called, but it's worth having a little read so you can see what sort of information you can gather from users and what the value of it is. Okay, so that's the research phase. Once you've done that, you need to compile all the research and run a workshop with all the key players so that you can create some ideas and try to prioritize them in some way. So, gather all the project team into a room, try to get a designer in there, and maybe even a developer. It's important for everyone who's going to be involved in the project to grapple with the issues early on, so that everyone is on the same level and understands where the direction is heading. And actually, I've found that developers are the most excited about new ideas anyway, so let's get them involved early, certainly for this idea generating part. So I'll take you through those three. The first step is to review the research and come up with as many solutions as you can to the problems that have been exposed. All ideas are encouraged, put them on a post-it. There are no bad ideas. Note them all down and try to group them in some way into functional areas like user information or paperwork, that kind of thing. And that'll take you maybe hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the amount of research that you've done. And once you've got it, then you can start to prioritize. I'm sure if you've done workshops in the past, this is quite a common way of prioritizing. Sort all your ideas into must-have, nice-to-have, future potential, and you've got to be strict. If you need to refer back to those business needs that the stakeholders spoke about and the user priorities chart that you should have. And if it doesn't fit, then you've got to go in nice to have. And even if you are strict, you'll notice that the must have is somewhat bloated. So that's okay at this stage. There are other points along the process where you can cut that down. But at least you'll have focused your ideas on the priorities at that point. And then if you've got time left at the end of the afternoon, the workshop shouldn't really take more than an afternoon anyway. Run a sketching exercise. Find some A4 paper, choose a feature or section page or even the home page and ask people to draw 2 versions of it within a minute. It doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to be flashy, just get some ideas down and then review it with each other, discuss the ideas, and then do another session for 2 minutes when you draw 1. So it's a bit more complicated. You can go a bit deeper into your ideas and then again review. And this is a really good way of revealing everyone's internal image of what they might be expecting, because they may not have articulated it or had a chance to articulate it so much at the moment, up until now. And it's also a bit of fun at the end of quite a long, brain-draining afternoon. Okay, so that's your workshop stage. The day after your successful workshop, while it's fresh, everyone is happy with the ideas and how they've been prioritized. But there are actually 2 more processes that you need to go through to get your final list of functionality and features that will form the first stage of your new platform. And the first is to look at engagement. And this will look at your specific user types. It'll involve more rearranging of post-its, but it is worth it. So take a look at these guys. Again, your skeptics, conservatives, pragmatists, visionaries, and I'm not sure which one of those 2 are visionary and which one is enthusiastic. Make sure that you take all your ideas and you slot them into the reasons to log on, reasons to return, reasons to lead. Take a look through Dan's presentation on SlideShare or pick up one of the ebooks. There's some great ideas in there. For now, here's a checklist or with some hints on how to organize these must-haves. So any ideas that are to do with navigation, search, naming conventions, basic usability, they fall under easy. Features that involve user information, reference materials, comms, that kind of thing, you'll actually find that most of your functionality falls under this bit. The pragmatists, reasons to return. So any ideas that you have to do with personalization or how you're going to create regular turnover, what your resources might be doing, use of video, anything like that, and anything to do with design, help and support, and again, user experience. That all falls under this reasons to return bracket. And then finally, Bill and this other guy, anything to do with posting, sharing content, blogs, videos, and anything to do with leadership. So any places, team rooms where people can share ideas to help the company improve its efficiency or help the platform improve. That all goes under here. And actually, you'll probably find that this is quite a sparse column of your prioritizing. And so you may have to dip into the nice-to-haves to fill this up, but it is worth putting those in because you need to engage the wide breadth of user. So this will take some time and a bit of discussion amongst your team, but it's quite a healthy thing to do. And in the end, you'll have a better idea of your priorities. And the goal really of all of this is to then revisit your scope. So you'll have generated way more ideas than you had at the beginning. You've got a lot of issues that you need to solve. They've all been prioritized through engagement and through what the business and user needs are. Now you take a look again and take everything you've done, work out what should be done, how long it's going to take, and therefore what can be done within the timescales and budgets that you have available, because they aren't infinite. Now's the time to create a functionality brief for your design team, your build teams, and when they have questions, you've got a lot of information to inform your answers. And that's the great thing about running through this process, is that you can always refer back to the original business needs, the user needs, and to know what will engage the most. And so at the end of this, you will have a complete, realistic list of everything you want to achieve, ordered by priority. So finally, you can take this list and do something with it. And that brings us on to the final part, which is your design and prototyping stage. But still, we're not going to jump into the visuals yet. There's still more to do. First thing, site architecture. You need to figure out your structure, your navigation, and make things easy to use, as this is one of the key things for reasons to log on, and it will keep people coming back as well. So the best way to do this is through card sorting. If you crowdsource your navigation, then it'll be much easier for people to use it. And remember these guys right at the beginning, now is the time for them to shine. Get them involved and you'll be amazed at the differences in how people like to organize things. Now, our favorite tool is Optimal Sort from Optimal Workshop. There are other tools available, but it's got so many great analysis tools. It's not free, but going free is a bit of a false economy, because the tools this offers saves you so much time that you actually make your money back. You should learn from our mistakes here, because we have tried to do it free and it takes ages. So use this tool and go through this process. First, take a list of all the features, create pages for them. Try to keep them the same level of granularity, so maybe an obscure policy update isn't at the same level as HR, so perhaps go somewhere in between. Find a set of users. 15 is okay. It's better if you have more, but you'll get a lot of great information from just 15. And make sure that their group of users is representative of your whole organization. Don't just go to the comms team. You need to get some of those users back. So the first part is an open sort. And here you offer up those lists and get people to group them into 5 to 10 groups and name the groups. That's a fairly common thing that people do during a sort. And you'll find some little gems in those group names that you'll never have thought of. So that's why it's really important to do that. And some of your users may not even know the meaning of some of these things, some acronyms. So that's also provides its own insights, because perhaps if people don't understand the words in your navigation, then you need to change those words. The next step is to analyze it. Find 5 to 8 groups that really work, that use plain English, that are mutually exclusive, so try to avoid too much overlap of where the pages might fit, and that cover everything. So you don't want to end up with other or general, because those are the worst words in the language as far as I'm concerned. And once you've settled on them, then you need to test that you've done a good job. And this, the way you do this is to do a closed sort. And so you provide those sparkly new group names that you've come up with, offer up that list of pages again, and ask people to place them within that group. And you're looking for about 70 to 100% match for the most important functionality. If you get 50%, then it means that people don't really know where to place the functionality, and you might need to revisit your group names. Okay, so once you've settled on your navigation and your structure, you'll have an idea of what pages exist and roughly what they're going to contain. So then you can move on to the visuals, but not quite the coloured stuff yet. You need to work on your wireframes. And the best and quickest way to do this is to create some wireframes, sketch them out. They don't need to be flashy. They just need to provide enough information to convey what should be on the page and what the key goals are for the page. So in this case, the goals are obviously to access your assets and branding, and then some events down there. And that's all we really needed to know at this stage. And although pretty much everyone is going to be most excited about getting the homepage done, I recommend you start from the inside out. Start with the content, which is the end point of where users are aiming for. This is where the information is going to lie. So make sure you make it easy for users to find once they get to that last page. And once you've done that, once you've nailed it, then you can zoom out a little bit, look at the section pages, look at the section home pages, and make sure that they are focused on driving people to that endpoint. And then finally you can zoom out and then look at the home page. But this is the way I like to do it. And with the home page, try to group it in the same kind of structures as you've got for your main navigation. Because your home page is really the primary real estate to teach people about the site. So if people arrive and your homepage doesn't really reflect the structure of the site, then that might be a bit confusing. Okay, and finally, once you've done your wireframes, you have an opportunity to test that you've done them right, because you don't want to start designing them or building until you know that they actually work. And so a way to do it, you can print them out and show them to people around the office. Or if you have someone in your team who can work Axure or any prototyping tool, then you can build those. But the key questions here are, what does the page do? What is it designed for? What's the function of this page? And if they answer clearly, then you've done a good job. And also look at some of the buttons, some of the call to actions, and ask people what they expect to happen next. Because that's where you get an idea of the journey that users expect to go on. And if you can match that journey with the journey you create, then it'll be so much easier for them to use. It won't be quite so jarring. Okay, so finally, you've tested your wireframes. Everything looks good. Then finally, you can ask these guys to apply the visual layer onto your wireframes. And actually, if you followed the process well enough, this part should be really simple. You'll have a lot of data to back it up, a lot of information. You can even start building before the visuals are complete, because you know the structures, and that's what people do when they work agile. And ultimately, the functionality that you've come up with will be engagement first, just because of the way you've done the process. And so you'll find that a lot of the otherwise more boring, less glamorous functionality will start to rise to the top, and some of what you originally thought was very exciting would fall down, perhaps into a phase 2 or 3 or never. And so that's about it. I'll leave you with a few links. This is the card sorting tool I recommend you get. This is that book. Just get it, you can dip into it whenever you want. It's a really good resource. And obviously, if you want to have a look at some great intranets, go to our website. But also take a look at the design annual from Nielsen Norman. There's some great ideas in there for functionality and design. So thank you very much. Any questions?